If you only take one thing away from this course, it's this. Studying longer does not necessarily mean that you're going to remember more. In fact, often, studying for shorter periods of time can actually improve your retention. The reason for this is something called the primary recency effect. Basically, it says that as a study session gets longer, it becomes less effective. This is why you may have heard of different techniques like the Pomodoro technique or time boxing technique, which suggests that you break up your work or study sessions into smaller chunks. This is exactly the structure that I propose with the Perfect Practice Plan. The Perfect Practice Plan is a structure I put forward on the Skill Cookbook blog that shows you how to use the primary recency effect to your advantage. There's a few key parts to the Perfect Practice Plan. The first thing is choosing good tasks. This means finding things that you can actually quantify and understand your progress at. When you practice, you want to actually be able to see where you started and where you end up. The next key part is switching up the tasks. Don't always do exactly the same thing when you study, or when you practice the guitar, or when you learn anything. You don't want to just sit there rereading the same chapter or doing the exact same riff over and over. It is important to work on the things that are challenging for you, yes, and repeat those sections, but the brain really expands when it sees things in new contexts. So when you do something in the same exact context over and over, it becomes less and less effective over time. This is why you want to try things in different situations. So if you tried scales on the guitar, then you want to use those scales in a song, and you want to use them in a solo, and have them just appear in different ways. If you've been studying a foreign language, you don't want to just do vocabulary drills over and over. You want to hear and listen and speak the words aloud and write them in sentences. This is again why Duolingo is very good, because it does have so many different contexts in which to use the material. Thirdly, we've already talked a bit about using short sessions, but let's just clarify what we mean by a short session. Surprisingly, it is possible to study or practice for too long. A good session length is somewhere around 20-30 minutes, followed by a brief break. The break can be really anything that is different than what you were doing. Something that switches it up and encourages you to just use your brain in a different way, or maybe even just relax. The important thing about the short sessions is that you start with some warm-up, then you go on to a main practice section, and then you do some recap or some cool down. You can find out exactly how to structure your sessions on the blog post. Fourthly, it's important to always have goals. You need to be moving towards something. If you're not actually trying to make progress on something, how do you know where you're going? If you just read the same chapter over and over, or if you're not testing yourself on your knowledge, then you're not sure if you're making progress. This is why it's very common for a student to simply read the textbook and think that they understand, but not necessarily have any way of being sure that they understand. As frustrating and annoying as tests and quizzes can be, they give you really valuable insight into how far you've come. Nextly, practice frequently, but not too frequently. I provide a sample schedule of a perfect practice plan on the blog. Really, as long as you're taking enough breaks, then you're doing okay. And that brings us to the last part, which is resting even more frequently. Resting plays a vital role in learning. It's a common misconception that learning actually happens during the studying, but that's not true. Learning happens during the recovery. The same is true of even working out at the gym. When you lift weights, your muscles are being torn by the act of lifting the weights. But when you sleep and recover, that's when the muscles rebuild. Your brain works essentially the same way. You're struggling and pushing yourself when you study, But when you rest, your mind is consolidating the ideas. It's putting them back together again. So to recap, the perfect practice plan is all about using short sessions with varied tasks and specific goals, making use of quantification so you can see how far you've come. Again, check out the blog at skillcookbook.com and you'll see a lot more details on exactly how I've structured some of my practice plans.